Up next, we have the police chief update. Chief McAlpine?
Good evening, Mayor and Council. Chief Kathy McAlpine for your end of year 2022 final statistics. I wish I had as much optimism as you just heard of our last two, but unfortunately I'm going to ground us in a little bit of reality right now. As you got your packet, obviously, as you get used to navigating, there's a lot of information monthly. And just as a reminder, anything that comes to mind to you and you want further information, I'm always accessible. Once I do this presentation, it does get put on our police transparency page, so the community members get to see this dashboard as well. So as we close out 2022, you see violent crimes. Now, generally they're embedded in our persons crime, but it's always very important to at least once a year pull these out. This is your homicides, your aggravated assaults, forcible rapes, things of that nature. And you can see we trended up quite a bit, even though, there's small numbers, they can be larger increases, but that is a concerning. Of that, we had 3 homicides this year. In comparison, last year we had 4. That's a troubling trend. That's 7, where the previous 4 years, all total of those 4 years, you had 2. And a lot of these are during some criminal activity. So these are not, victims of, unknown victims of random violent crimes. This is in place of perhaps a drug deal gone bad, things of that nature that we're seeing, but still a troubling trend nonetheless. Next slide, please. Yeah. So again, overall, on the crimes against person, you can see again where we're trending, and that's up from about 34% from last year. 2018 is where I really look at kind of pre-pandemic, and so that's my gauge. That was at our height, what we saw, which really prompted kind of the levy ask. We were not staffed properly, and those numbers. And so we did dip during the pandemic, but now we're climbing again and actually surpassing 2018, which is obviously not what we want to see. And again, even though homicides appeared as down 25% from last year, again, 4 last year was a complete anomaly, and to even have 3, which includes our double homicide at the Embassy Suites, and then of course the homicide at Just Compassion behind their facilities. Other trends that we're seeing is, again, robberies. When a shoplift goes bad and loss prevention or law enforcement wants to take somebody in custody, we see the combativeness fighting back. And that then changes it from a theft to now a robbery. And so that's why you see those numbers, and they're up 89%. And that is a national trend that we're seeing, is this combativeness to loss prevention. And some of it is just our locals, and others are the organized retail rings. Next slide. So crimes against property, as you can imagine, that's all stolen property, arson, embezzlement, forgery, stolen vehicles, burglaries, and that's all burglaries, your residential, commercial. The others are generally our storage facilities, is how we parse those out. And then of course any vandalism, frauds, and our thefts. Where we're seeing the uptick in particular is our stolen vehicles. And again, we saw a lot of them being recovered in Portland and vice versa. That was up 69% from the year before. Burglaries were up 48%, but it was over 100% for the storage facilities. And a lot of that, we saw the trend was the way facilities were managing during a COVID time and allowing remote access and things of that nature. We saw that people were taking advantage of being able to access those storage units. And then of course thefts, and with organized retail, we went from 48 in 2021 to 128 in 2022. And again, that is a national trend that, and in fact, I think there's some legislative movement asking for Department of Justice to study organized retail theft a little bit more because it is such a national trend. And we've had many agencies come and say, tell us about your commercial crime unit and the things that you're doing, because they're also trying to respond in the same area. And then finally, as very important is I always talk about, is our dispatch calls for service. And you can see that, again, we've surpassed 2018, almost 300 calls. But what is not obvious in there that I think I need to point out, in 2018, we did not have the online reporting services that we, I think, started in 2020, which is great, you know, for people who really don't want to wait in any length of time. That is that opportunity for more cold calls that perhaps they can go through their insurance company. They just need a number, or they think we want to know, which we do, and there's no suspects. Well, if you go to 2022, these are just dispatch calls for service. We had another almost 500 calls into our online. So you can actually bring that up to a higher number when you talk about the service that our community need of us. And then the other part of this is, just as I've kind of been speaking, is the complexity of the calls. When you're talking about welfare checks, our behavioral health, they take time. The community is asking us, you know, across the country, slow it down, try and de-escalate, try and resolve this, and those take time, and that means other calls are pending. So again, just want to, it's effective, but it has another impact that we have to deal with. So and those will usually fall in the priority 3 calls, which maybe are not imminent or immediate, but yet they take a lot of our times on. I would say the majority of those are our behavioral health calls that land in that priority 3. And there were about 5,000 of those calls for service were in that category. Our priority 1 and 2s, which again with the levy, we always say we want to reduce that under 6 minutes. We've seen that increase. So to give you an example, in 2018, we had 4,186 priority 1 and 2s. This year we ended with 4,469. So again, complexity of calls, the importance of calls is what we're seeing when we do some of our analysis. Okay, let me end with at least a positive note. If I can go to the last slide. So many of you said, what's next? In our strategic plan, we've always wanted to transition to a Chiefs Advisory Panel, but of course with the Public Safety Advisory Board, that was inappropriate to just give all of our attention to what the board did. But once they were completed and we had the 2 community academies, it was a perfect time to really solicit participation from that group. And I really cast it out to the Public Safety Advisory Board and those who attended the Community Academy, because they've gotten so much education, they've been front-loaded. And of course there was enough people and a very diverse group that will serve business communities, our diverse community, it's all there. And then with the help of Youth Counselor Nog, we have 2 potential youth that may be interested in attending. I'm communicating with both of them, so I hope to be able to announce their names as well. And we are going to have our inaugural meeting on MLK Day in the evening, and I thought, how, you know, either you think that's bad and we want to not do it on that one, or we celebrate what MLK is about and kick off. And it was a resounding yes, we want to attend, and that day is perfect. So hope to be able to report out the progress of that. And those aren't recorded there, and I imagine there'll just be a lot of honest discussions. Both I'm hearing from them and I'm sharing information back, and hopefully find that this is beneficial on both sides. So a lot of information, happy to answer any questions that you may have.
Okay, thank you. For the Chiefs Advisory Council, how often are you anticipating meeting?
So right now we're thinking once a month, because I think we've seen different configurations where some do quarterly. I don't feel that's enough or timely if we have some issues, or I want to bounce something off or share a new policy. So I'm going to see what they want. I'm really trying to leave it to them also, and we'll. But right now I'm thinking a Monday, maybe the second Monday, once a month, and then gauge it for a little bit is what we'll look at. About 2 hours, make it meaningful with a lot of things going on. But I also want to frequent enough that I get some input, should I then come in front of you or anywhere else, maybe I've used them as a sounding board for me on what questions they may have.
That's great. Any other questions for the chief? Councilor Shaw?
Thank you, Mayor. Testing out the hand raising function. Chief, thank you very much. I'm always hoping the numbers go down, but you had mentioned the combativeness of those who are shoplifting. Do you see that? And did you mention that was nationwide? And if so, is there anything we can do? My understanding that was due to a change in the laws recently, and how many offenses one could have before arrested, but just wanted to check in and see what your thoughts are on that.
Yes, you're absolutely right. That is a national trend that we're seeing. And, you know, part of it is an overall attitude towards police or any authority. So we're talking about loss prevention. Of course, people don't want to be taken into custody, and they don't think that, because they'll be shocked if they go into one box store, they may just walk out, and maybe it's the policy of that department store not to engage. And then yet they go to another one and they do have loss prevention and they do engage, and now they're going to, you know, resist or actually assault, as you've heard me say in some cases. And then the fleeing part of this when we're responding. And so I think it's just an overall attitudinal part of this, as well as not on the organized retail theft, but more on your individual persons. We're seeing a lot of fentanyl use. And again, I think people obviously do not want to be caught and put in jail for those withdrawal purposes and other accountability. So we're seeing a little bit of both. And then the organized retail thefts are organized rings that are, you know, in some ways their own gang of a group that are professionals that go along state lines and the I-5 corridor. They can come from California, they come from Washington, and we communicate on both sides of the state because of I-5, and we see similar people. And again, the challenge is also how quickly do the stores call us, and then the avenue of escape in using the freeways is definitely a challenge for us.
Thank you, Chief.
Absolutely.
Councilor Wolf?
So Chief McAlpine, as I was sitting here listening and thinking about Councilor Shaw's question, and we'll be talking about our legislative agenda as well, and just that supportive police reforms that make sense. And I know the recommendations that the Public Safety Advisory Board, you know, provided, hopefully continue to assist with how we provide services. But any thoughts about that as you're, you know, showing numbers that are headed in the wrong direction, just ideas for particular things we should be advocating for?
Well, I know that majority of my peers, to include myself, believe that ballot measure 110 and decriminalizing drugs has not helped us at all. From the boots on the ground, what we see. I do know there was a study, an independent study, that suggested that's not true. However, what we see on a day-to-day basis, there is. Bail reform, again, it may help a variety of folks, but your repeat offenders, when they're not staying for any length of time in jail waiting for trial, then they're coming out and they're reoffending. And so what is intended to be equitable and fair does have an impact on folks, and we're challenged with that. And so whether or not I believe, my understanding is Governor Kotek wasn't interested in reopening or reappealing that during her election campaign. Unless something's changed, I don't know that that's going to happen. But I do believe we need other avenues. And so as Nicole Hendricks talks about the legislative, for us, and as we even educated to the downtown businesses, we need those services in place for those who are experiencing mental health, because our only avenue now is jail, which is limited and isn't appropriate, and they usually don't qualify for that. And then the emergency rooms, who are flooded, and the doctors aren't equipped, and the nurses and the staff there and then they're back outside the door. And so the community still sees the same person over and over again and wonders where they're getting help. And so we need that system, and I believe Governor Kotek spoke to that her focus would be in making sure we stand up those services. But I can tell you, without a detox center, without places to go, it is just flooding our streets, whether you have a drug addiction, a mental health situation, or some other substance use disorder. Those are real live concerns. And as the only really 24/7 agency, along with your emergency rooms and the fire department, we're left to try and, for lack of a better term, triage the moment. But nobody's getting the help that they truly need to manage their own diseases. So thank you for asking.
Are there any additional questions? Thank you, Chief.
Thank you.